Welcome to the All You Serve webinar for October. Glad you were able to join us. While everyone's getting on and getting situated, again, you're participating in the All You Serve webinar, Food Seen Through Your Patient Eye. My name is Marcia Diamond, and I'm New Business Development with All You Serve. Some housekeeping tips. If you have any questions, please type them in, and we'll try to get to them halfway through the program and then towards the end, the rest. The other housekeeping tip is this is being recorded, and the webinar and the PowerPoint slideshow and the certificate of participation, the webinar, the PowerPoint slideshow, the audio, and the certificate of participation will be available online at allyouserve.com starting early next week. You can download it there. So again, welcome to the webinar. And we are going to get started because we have a full 40 an hour information on Food Seen Through Your Patient Eye. I am really thrilled to have Atul, Juan, and Dan Henroyd joining me today and sharing their expertise and their intuitiveness. And so I think you will enjoy this program and walk away with a lot of aha moments. So today's program, the takeaways are you will be able to identify the satisfiers of tray presentation. You will learn the meal assembly and meal delivery merchandising tips to increase satisfaction and increase the positive meal service experience that people expect or exceeding their expectations. And you will be able to adopt 3 strategies to implement today. So without further ado, I'm going to pass this over to Dan to give you the operations perspective.
Thank you, Marcia. It's a pleasure to be here today, and it's amazing how much interest is in this topic. So we're really excited, and we hope that you come away with a few ideas from the presentation and get lots of great questions. I'm Dan Henroyd. I'm the Director of Nutrition and Food Services for UCSF Health. It's a 2-hospital academic medical center system in San Francisco. We have been pretty progressive, and we recently opened up a new state-of-the-art medical center on the east side of town. You can kind of see where our sites are with the 2 primary hospital sites, and then we just opened up a 3rd one. I'm a dietitian by training, as you can see from the RD, but I've also been an academic at a couple of different places, worked in hospitals in Chicago and other parts of the country. So hopefully you can learn a few things from us, just kind of sharing what we do, and hopefully that helps. So our patients expect, great service at a great value, as most of yours do, and while that certainly is a little bit more retail focused, we see that sort of carry through when they're patients in our institution. Certainly the Bay Area is known as one of the places in the country that has the greatest proliferation of produce. We're very blessed to have local. We actually track the amount of sustainable spend that we have, and so we've been doing this for 5 years now, and for the last 2 years we've been at about 26.7%. And so as much as possible, people are really into food out here, and so we want to be able to translate these principles onto the meal tray for the patient dining program. And you'll hear me say the words patient dining quite a bit in the presentation, because that's what I believe we're trying to provide, a dining experience with food plating and presentation being a key component of that. One other tenet that my team and I try to do is about being food and nutritionally transparent, and letting people make informed decisions, but also trying to change the way they perceive things as we present our dining program to them. So our success formula is pretty straightforward, as you see on the slide. It's about food, it's about service, and it's about the environment in which people eat it. And so sometimes you don't have a lot of control over the in-room experience, although I would certainly encourage all my colleagues to get involved in some of those decisions. We've done things like getting double-stacked bedside over tables so that all the stuff that's in front of the patient doesn't have to be touched and cleared away we can get a clean dining surface. And I did say in the slides, services are plural. It is about the speed of service. It is about the timeliness of it. It is about providing guest meals and perhaps other things that you can do. And all that is about what does the food look like when people get it in front of them, and that they do eat with their eyes. One key takeaway we believe is everything starts with the menu. So what does yours look like? How much time and effort have you put into that? And I believe at some point we're going to have to find creative ways as healthcare food service operators to really allow people to better eat with their eyes in terms of putting pictures and other things on there. And there's some new technologies that are out there, including augmented reality, that we're playing around with to potentially do that. So making sure that the menu is clear, straightforward, and then more fundamentally, how have you helped set people's expectations in terms of how do they order things? Do they really truly know how to order food in your institution, and how can you set those expectations as soon as possible from the time of admission and to the time that they're eating? Most patients believe that the cafe menu and the patient menu and many of your staff and your colleagues are one and the same. So while this session is a little bit more focused on patient dining, don't forget about retail, because you can do some nice things in retail and actually get a pop on your patient satisfaction scores for your patient meal service. That's at least what we found in our particular area. So we'd like to kind of just show some basic things that we're doing, taking something simple like a baked potato and looking at, can we present, pardon me, in a different way, using some color that perhaps isn't typically used in terms of the purple kale, and trying to give it a little bit of a spin as opposed to just sort of a plain baked potato on a white plate. I've heard of other colleagues that we're not looking at colored plates, and so can you do some other things there? Maybe not all the time you're doing a different color, but is there a nice neutral color that you can do to give some other comparison and contrast? We like to use some small dishes as much as possible to take things that may traditionally run all over the plate and make them appear much tighter. So you have both a beef stir fry and a chicken stir fry. In this particular instance, it is still going on a China plate. We are an on-demand room service dining program, so we are using an induction pellet system with a heated plate, but we're also heating these casserole dishes as well, and then plating in them so that there is pretty nice presentation to not only visually elevate, but also just kind of give some height to the actual food dish that's there. You see another example here, again, some contrast with spaghetti and marinara, as well as a spaghetti meat sauce. And so this is not over-the-top plating and garnishing. We're doing 1,500 patient meals a day between our two campuses, so we are pretty high volume, and we are trying to deliver in 45 minutes or less. And so we're very proud of being able to achieve that and have an average meal time of about 33 minutes to make sure that the food not only is plated and presented, but also goes up and remains hot. Also looking at things that come in small sizes. Swirl dishes have been on the market for quite some time. There's a lot of shrink with those, but they do really help give a nice spin to it. And then also looking at ways to not put saran over the top. I'm pretty anti-saran wrap, at least from a plating and presentation standpoint. We've also started using ramekins to do something simple. These are some side items for our salseros taco concept that we can plate up in advance, hold them in a steam well, again, making sure that when you use these other dishes, there isn't a lot of heat transfer between the pellet to the plate to the ramekin. So anytime you can sort of preset these up, hold them in an appropriate way so that they are nice and hot for the patient, that's always the risk. So just be very careful if you guys go to sort of plating in other dishes. A little lag on there, we go. I think one thing that we always try to keep in mind is what is their first impression? You've probably heard the adage that it takes 10 repeat occurrences to change a first impression. I'm not sure of the science behind that, but it kind of resonates a little bit with us. Sometimes that patient's first meal is not actually a hot meal. It's actually a cold meal. So we've given you two pretty straightforward cold boxes. Again, they have a little bit of height, some visual contrast between the colors. We've actually just moved to, and I'm not showing it here, so the plastic lid that goes on top of these actually has our brand on it, our UCSF Fresh brand will be on all that. So typically we worry more about labels and branding in a retail setting. We're actually trying to take some of those retail branding concepts and put them into the patient dining program, and actually trying to leverage that perception that what you do in retail also you do in patient dining. So doing something really simple and taking a grab-and-go brand, applying that to a patient dining. This is the kind of meal that is either ordered upon request from our patient dining program. In some cases, they might be stocked in certain patient care areas. We've also gone to rethermable meals in a similar container. This packaging actually is microwavable, but being able to provide that to patients, perhaps in lieu of that cold sandwich, also has given us a lot of bump on our meal satisfaction scores.
Dan, a question came up about labeling. So you're labeling this, you will label any of this, so the cover that goes on it is more like it gives you more of an impression of a takeout, grab and go, and you label that to be complementing with your ingredients and so forth. Is that correct?
It is. Yes, it is. So we would put nutritionals, allergens, use by dates. We're using an on-demand labeling system. We have quite a few of those in our operation, so we would actually label and date the patient dining ones very comparably to the ones that we would do in retail. But we have added a few extra things on there depending if a meal is reheatable or not. So again, always really taking a step back on your tray. So we began our journey into an on-demand patient dining program in 2010. We had gone to our administration several times to get the labor to do it, and we're never successful. So we did something that I typically would not recommend, is doing it incrementally, meaning that at some point we're running a traditional tray line doing mass production, and we're doing on-demand. So we're trying to keep our tray standards very, very comparable to this. So I would encourage you to do things like take pictures of this. So our tray, as we've evolved it over time, I'm showing you the 2013 version. So a very nice tray mat, a nice napkin, but because it's white, the plate's white, both plates are white, there's not a ton of visual contrast. So I think the food plating actually looks pretty good, but it doesn't pop so much. So this past year, because we went to we opened up a new hospital, we took that opportunity to change our program. So the item on the left was a blue tray. It was a green underliner, green plastic. There, you can also see that there's very little saran on there, though we have put a condiment cup on there, and that's become pretty standard these days so that you don't have the condiments all over the place. Everything has its place, from where the mug is placed, where it is turned. You can see we've gone to a matless tray. This is a non-skid tray. We went back and forth quite a bit on whether or not we really wanted that brand recognition on the tray or not. We were looking at custom tray mats, and a lot of it just came down to labor in terms of the time and effort to put that mat on the tray, probably 1,700 times a day for our two locations, just wanting to do other things. You can see on the upper left, again, a nice cup of strawberries, but it does have a plastic lid to that. Part of that is looking at, again, can we get rid of that saran? I'll take this look any day of the week and twice on Sunday, rather than having the saran. The other part is really about that dark contrast. So by going to more of a black, even with the speckled non-skid surface, you can see that it really kind of draws the food out quite a bit. And then you do that with that yellow napkin, and it does do a little bit of a pop. We also went up a little bit on the quality of the silverware, and we all know that silverware is typically an area of major shrink for all of us, and also is an expense. So we did this very carefully, but we did decide that, again, it is a little newer out of the box, but overall it does maintain its shine more than sort of what's pretty much a very ordinary set of silverware on the 2013 tray. While we opened up the new hospital and we have very traditional on-demand dining, we also have an ambulatory services site. So we're very proud of having a true hotel-style tray as well that looks a little bit like this. So the only thing that's missing on this particular tray is the metal dome. It's in a scenario where we do have very quick speed of service from where the kitchen is up to where these ambulatory surgery patients are. It is generating revenue for a small 150-seat cafe, and again, in large volume things, you might have situations where that china mug walks away, the carafe walks away. These things are not cheap, but we had very tight control over this, and our ambulatory services center wanted to go use all kinds of outside food vendors, and so we worked with them to sort of come up with a flat price on the trays, recharge them for it, but also leverage the fact that it is pretty clean looking, has the contrast, it's built off the same platform as our inpatient dining tray, so it does provide a little bit of perspective because we really wanted to compete and exceed their expectations. Nice colorful presentation. I think always taking pictures of your trays really helps kind of sensitize your team. I would even go so far as go for a week or two and take a picture every single day, at least one every single meal, and bring those back to your staff meetings and have some comparison and contrast, not to point fingers at people, but just to say, hey, these are some things that we can potentially do better. I have a dream. My dream is that there's nothing plastic looking on our patient dining tray. So it's still a work in progress, but we're making some strides to get there. Just some of my takeaways, and again, some of these are not rocket science and are pretty straightforward, but how often are you rounding and eliciting feedback from customers? There's really no true replacement of it. You can have other people do rounding, but at the end of the day, you being in front of there, being up there looking professional. I actually wear a chef's coat. I'm not a chef. They let me play one, but it does bring a different mystique to going into the room. How are the service staff trained to deal with all of those frontline issues? Our journey in terms of getting better has been working on and improving all elements of that success formula. The great food and our plating. We have an extremely thick book that has a picture of literally how every single food item should be plated, and then we've built that into our recipes as well. It is a journey. It is a process improvement. Any time of real-time metric that you can tie to your patient dining program, I would strongly encourage people to do that. We actually report to our team on a daily basis how we're doing, whether that's how long it takes people to get through and place an order, or how we're meeting our quality standards when it comes to plating and presentation. And publishing them and committing to them that we're going to do this on a daily basis has really made a huge difference in them feeling good about themselves, but also saying, hey, we do a really great job. And it has shown up. We use Press Ganey as a third party. We're in about the 75th percentile right now. When I started 9 years ago, we were in single digits. So we have made some strong improvements over that time. And then lastly, again, not rocket science, but I've certainly learned the hard way. Engage nursing and the influencers in your hospital because they can make or break. So for as much as you're in front of the patient and plating and presenting great food, make sure that you actually are trying to meet and serve some of their needs as well. Some of those may be more patient dining related, some of them are not. So with that, I'd like to turn over to my colleague who's going to talk a little bit more about the details.
Dan, before we get over, I have some questions, so we're going to pause for a moment and answer some questions. So a couple were, they asked how many staff do you have in your hospital do you work with? That was one of the questions.
How many staff in my department or how many staff?
Yes. For patient, focused on patient meal service.
Let's see, in our smaller hospital, we have, I believe, 55 FTEs, but that's not all patient dining employees. Some of those are sanitation. And then in our larger hospital, does about 1,200 meals a day. We are at about 60 FTEs. And then we have an enterprise call center that cuts across all 3 of the campuses, and that's another 12. So but part of that is contextual in terms of it's a very old building. In the new in the main campus, that's about 450 beds. The new place, which is 289, is a very long building. The kitchen is located on the north side of the building, and majority of the meals are on the south tower from there. So we actually end up using robots to move the food from the north side of the building to the south side.
Thank you. And then another question was, you did the ramekins, you used the smaller dishes to elevate, and you showed different ways to contrast that, and also got the small dishes. So question was asked, are there any staffing challenges adding the additional dishware? Did you have any staffing challenges, or how were you able to accomplish, if you had staffing challenges, how did you solve that, and how did you make sure that people were accountable and that obviously the end result was the patient experience, but again, the additional dishware?
So again, we are not using the ramekins all of the time. We are using them on selected ones that make sense. So overall net, it didn't add a lot of dishes to be washed. I think our bigger issue was shrink. Everyone loves those kind of little ramekins, and they decide they want to keep them, whether it's the patients or the staff members. That was probably our biggest issue, because when you're doing an on-demand dining program, the dishes sort of trickle in, so there's not this massive glut of those. So we didn't have any additional staffing that needed to be added at all.
Thank you. And another question for you, Dan, is you showed the cold meal package, and that's what I'm going to try to go back, if I can go back to that. Let me see if I can get back to that cold meal. You showed the cold meal boxes. Somebody asked, how do you use those? Are they used for patients, or they're just used for ER? How are those cold meal packages used?
Those particular meals are actually ones that we would pre-make in advance. They go to a couple of kind of non-inpatient areas, but that is how we have opted to do our cold boxes. We do have a few cold boxes that could go up, and you could certainly plate them and present them as such, but this is how we do our veggie boxes as well as our fruit boxes, in part because we are using the same standards, particularly in the Children's Hospital, for retail as we are for patient dining. So there is an opportunity to sort of use them interchangeably since they're meeting the same standards. So we opt to plate them in disposable rather than going onto a cold plate, perhaps with a plastic dome.
Okay, thank you. So you pre-portion those. So I think this is a great perspective on, again, looking at the meal experience, remembering the things that you need to do, getting feedback from your customers, engaging nursing also in the tray look. Again, when you have more people buying into a great look, to a great food, to a great visual, then the overall positive experience translates, and also encompasses your whole environment. And people aren't saying quote unquote hospital food, but there comes the real good food, or there comes the food. Probably like a component of some of you who back in the 70s remember, here comes the judge. Well, here comes the food, in more of a positive way. Thank you very much, Dan. So I think, the last question is, what type of trays do you, if you wanted to know what type of trays they use, they said a skidless, and as far as if you wanted to know exactly which manufacturer, you'll have Dan's contact to get in touch with him at the end, or any particular. Okay, and without further ado, let's transfer to get the culinary perspective from Atul. Okay?
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us, for giving us your time, and to Marsha and Dan. Dan, thank you very much for that great insight. I myself took a lot of notes while you were going on over there, and hopefully I'll bring them up during our chat and kind of highlight them and compare them as to what I'm talking about. So I'm Atul Jain, Chef and Operations Manager at St. Clair's Hospital in New Jersey, and I joined healthcare about 4 years ago. I was in BNI before this, and so my perspective towards food and eating itself has changed a lot. And my biggest passion outside of food now has become interacting with dietitians. They are my true partners in crime. We argue, we discuss, we brainstorm, and we work together. But today we're going to talk about food. And you guys ever think food that comes from food service, the word food that comes from food service? Give me one moment, please. I'm trying to scroll down. Okay.
Okay.
So when we talk about food from the word food service, that's key to me. That's my passion. I think I want to say everybody in this call, to some extent, food is the passion that you have that has brought you here today. Does your food make your guest happy? It makes me happy, and that's why I want to use the word happiness. It brings so many different things to so many different people, especially with our business. But is it making your guest happy? I ask my staff every day, is it making your guest happy? Is it making you happy? Food has an impact on people. Psychological, physical, restorative properties, and then all of that tied together lands up in a state of well-being, the state of happiness. Have you ever had a situation where you think your patients or your guests are coming back for the food? I'm sure some of you are nodding your heads yes. And some of you, I don't know. Do you know about that? Well, when I walked into our hospital, we weren't sure. And within a matter of 2 years, I did have a situation where we also furnish a long-term care, and there was a lady who owned a pasta company. She had sold it off since, and she was just painful. Our entire staff was like, when is she going to leave? And I had the opportunity to finally go meet her and listen to her and just fix a few things on her plate. She just wanted things done her way. Plating was one of them, and the quantity of sauce. Guess what? I see her 9 months later, and I'm like, hey, why are you here? And she said, well, I came back for the food. She lives about 45 miles from our hospital, but she asked her son to bring her back to our hospital because of the food and not to take her to somewhere else. So that itself was a story that resonates with me, that's there with me. In that sense, I've had a lot of other people who have come back to our team members and myself and said, we are here for the food. It's simple, but it's clean. And that's the biggest gratification that I take home on a daily basis. So eating with your eyes, that's what we're talking about today. What's the goal? Why are we talking about eating with your eyes? Enhance patient satisfaction, enhanced experience, which Dan talked about, the dining experience. He wants to call it the patient dining experience. The word experience. You think about a restaurant, you go to a restaurant, and even if it's a pizzeria and you see a pizza walking, somebody carrying a pizza by, and you're like, wow, I want that. Eating with your eyes. Let's take that experience that you had and bring it to our operation. And finally, how does all of that tie into dollars? Because that's what it's all about, in addition to the experience. And if it's not about dollars today in your place, I'm sure it's going to be there at some point in time. In addition to these few goals, there are some other benefits. So these benefits, we talked about patient nutrition, portion control. If you plate properly, it has to be done with proper portion control. Portion control ties in with production, or the quantity of food produced on a daily basis. It is rare, it's really rare, from a catering company to most food service operators that I have seen, where people say, oh, we underproduced. A really good chef or a good manager knows how much to produce, and you have that 5% variance. But really underproducing, my cooks don't underproduce, and it's a good challenge where I have to stand in the kitchen and work around and make sure that they produce the right quantity, or they batch cook. So my take to them is, let's do less work. You cook what you need to cook, you prep what you need to prep, and that will save you time to do other things. So I try to pitch them, do less work, which actually helps us with controlling food cost, and then helps us by them not asking for more help, which translates to labor cost. And then finally, waste. All of this lands up with less waste. When we talk about less waste, if you have lesser waste coming back from a patient tray, that's less garbage, that's less cleaning materials, that's less chemicals, and that's a greener world. So going a little far stretch, but these are the benefits of eating with your eyes. Moving on to how do we implement this? That's what I'm here to talk about, the food piece of it predominantly, and then what are the key things that we can take away from Dan and my presentation, where how do I really start this whole process? My suggestion, these are just a few suggestions. Identify the team members who will partner with you in this. Those one or two key people who have a voice, yet they have positive energy. I've heard a number of Food Network chefs, celebrities talk. They say, you give me a cook, but give me the right attitude. I don't need a fancy chef. I don't need somebody who's fully trained. Because with the right attitude, I can turn my whole operation around. And I believe in that. When we recruit, we look for attitude first, then we look for skill level, unless it's the need for the job. Next is come up with a vision. What's your vision? Dan expressed it very clearly. 9 years ago he started. He had a vision. And in his closing statement somewhere he said, I have a vision, very clearly. I have a vision. Do you have your vision for your plate, for your tray, for your crew? Have that vision, write it down, and then start educating your players. Start with the people who have the voice, who have the positive attitude, and then with that education, you implement your vision. Make the changes. Finally, when you're implementing it, empower them. Let them do the job, because if you start doing the job, you'll be stuck in that, and you will not be able to get out. Let them do it, but the key part to all of this is holding them accountable. This is where I think as a manager, at least for me, it's the most challenging piece, holding them accountable. Because if we don't hold them accountable, somebody will come and just change the whole table, and you'll be like, well, we just did this differently. So we have to hold them accountable. Sorry, my slides are sliding. Getting to the basics of plate presentation. Again, I'm going to talk about culinary piece of it for the most part. The basics of plate presentation. There's color, texture, height. If you remember Dan's trays, he mentioned there was a white tray, and then there was this black tray with a pop of white and yellow in it. So that's the piece of color. How do you implant that color factor onto your food? Texture. Give it a little crunch, a little bite to it. So you can add beans, you add greens, you can add a crisp piece to it. Height. This picture that you see in front of you with a stack of romaine lettuce, that's a little extenuated. It's not exactly what you would put under your tray cover, but I wanted to put it out there just as a matter of height. You want to give it height. And I'll show you a few pictures where the plate is flat. That's again hospital food. So we're going to be talking also about hospital food. How are we going to change the concept of hospital food into a dining experience? And then finally, a clean plate. You can add all of this, but if you've noticed in restaurants, in good restaurants, you have chefs or the aboyer, he cleans the plate around, the rim of the plate. You don't want a fingerprint over there. You don't want like stains on the edge of your plate. You want a clean plate. So how do we convert the plate on the left to the plate on the right? These two plates have been made in our operation, and yes, one of them has been purposely messed around with. You see that flat thing? The sauce was just poured on. Ever wonder, has this kind of a plate ever been presented to one of my guests? Well, I'll be honest, it has been in our operation, and that's why now most of our plating is like the one on the right. So to get down to the nitty-gritty, the one-on-one of basic culinary plating, this is like going back to culinary school. Take a plate and split it into 4 quadrants like a clock. On the top left, you have your starch, and you can flip-flop the starch and veg. You have the vegetables on the right-hand side, and the main, the entree, or the protein at around the 6 o'clock position. This is what I call the Y style of plating. If you see how the Y is laid out, the starch at 10 o'clock, the vegetables at 1 o'clock, the entree at 6 o'clock, and then we put the sauce from 7 o'clock to 5 o'clock or 6 through 4, however you want to make it look nice. In this plate, everything is flat just for a visual perspective, but if you look at this next plate, this was taken from the internet, there is a little bit of height. There's mashed potatoes, beans on top of the mashed potatoes, half on, half off, and then the beef is half on, half off, and then the sauce is plated. Very classical, very typical. Yes, it is kind of old school, but my question is, Are we even following that old school clean style of plating? And then finally, if you look at the edge of the plate, the rim, everything is clean. There's not a stain anywhere. That makes an impact. That's how the food pops out on a white plate. I mentioned white plate. Dan talked about colored plates. So how do we use your color of the food with the color of the plate? Let's get into just basics of plating again, using the Y concept. I've taken some shots over here on how you can actually plate. Think of yourself to be in a kitchen right now. Basic white plate. We are using an ice cream scoop here. We scoop the potatoes, the starch at 10, the vegetables at 1, the main entree at 6, sauce goes down on the bottom from 7 through 5. It's almost like a smiley face. And then the garnish. To break up that whole color, that's very earth tones, yellow, brown, golden, orange, on a base of white, we threw a pop of green with a parsley sprig. So finally, that plate lands on a tray. And this tray, we'll come up to talk a little more about tray plating, tray presentation a little later, but this is how it would go out.
So I have a question. Can I force you, Atul? I have a question going back to the slide before. Question came up. I mentioned that you showed the garnishes. What kind of, give me the top 4 different type of garnishes that you can recommend and the top 4 sauces that people can get that smiley face that you can recommend.
I mean, when you say sauces, I'm going to hit sauces first. Anything is a sauce. You can take a gravy as a sauce. If you're doing pot roast, just visualize this plate that you have right now. You remove the beef, you remove the chicken, you add 3 or 4 or 5 slices of beef, and you take the pot roast gravy. We keep that separately in a bowl on our line, or we actually have a combo of a non-select line and a room service, and we pull it out of the same kitchen. We have that in a small little container, and as each plate goes out, we literally plate the sauce after the beef is put on. So we don't just plop it on.
So Atul, so things like beef gravies, pesto sauce, parsley puree, cilantro,
like you mentioned, you can make purees out of red pepper, make a coulis. You want to thicken it. You can get into technical culinary detail in that and how do you thicken it and how does it hold on and not just spread all over. So you mentioned parsley puree. You can use cilantro puree. You can use just a mix, spinach, arugula, cilantro, just herbs, and it's you're calling it puree. I'm calling it pesto. Can you add dairy to it? Can you add a thickener to it without adding any gluten to it? So you can come up with when you get into cooking and you can get into the technical details of how to thicken that sauce and what sauce goes with what. Now this is a cornflake crusted chicken, again home style food. We didn't want to make it fancy restaurant style, so we didn't make it complicated with cilantro pesto or arugula pesto. Again, this is just basics, but
right, but someone could do that to give a better experience or choice to the patient and make it very simple and upgraded. That's what the question was. So to take it to the next step for meal experience, to give it a pop for color, that's what you can do.
Correct.
Is that correct?
And yes, okay. That is correct. And when you mention sauces, we'll come to a list of tools that I have recommended on what you can use for plating. And we'll talk a little more about those different tools as we go along. I'm just trying to move.
Okay. Sounds great. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Also talking about different components that go on a plate. So we talked about basic 3 components, starch, veg, entree, sauce. Now here is 2 sides. How would you plate 2 sides? This is one option, which is, there's mac and cheese as a side dish over here. It's okay. Or this option, this option. We use a silver ramekin. There's a reason for using the silver ramekin because, again, like Dan said, there's shrinkage. We didn't want to invest in a China ramekin that goes in the oven, but we use a aluminum foil ramekin, pretty inexpensive. Put the mac and cheese in that, put some cheese, we gratinate it, it goes out. It goes as a side dish. You'll see another dish as we plate it later on, where you can make an entree in a casserole. And the broccoli, instead of just dumping it on the plate, it has been assembled. 2 or 3 pieces of broccoli, give it a little height, put it properly. It shows and tells the customer that there's some thought that has gone into this plate. And once again, clean plate. Moving on to purees. This, I think, is a very tough piece of our business. Everybody loves to plate like a restaurant. It's very easy to plate with regular food, what we call our regular diet. What about chopped and purees? It's not easy. How do you make a puree look beautiful? I've talked to so many vendors. I've talked to different chefs. How do you make a plate look beautiful? And there are some really creative ways to do it. And like we mentioned earlier, using purees of parsley and pesto in a squeeze bottle, that's how you can add a little vibrancy, a little depth to that plate with different colors. Dan mentioned purple kale. Make a puree of purple kale, of purple carrots. That gives you a different dimension to the whole plate, how it looks. Over here, we have on the left side a messy plate. It was messed up intentionally to give you an idea what can happen. On the right side, again, you have the veg and the starch on top, the protein, a puree of chicken on the bottom, and then the sauce on the side. Very simple. Obviously, we did not add chopped parsley or the parsley sprig, but we could have added a little dot or a little dollop of parsley puree or oil of parsley or oil of rosemary. Rosemary and thyme go very well with chicken, so that would have accentuated this plate over here. Again, a close-up of that same puree plate over here. Mind you, I am, as a chef, looking at the clean edges. The plate is not sparkling new in this picture. It is what we use every day, but here it is, with a clean plate. A few other pictures that we took to show on the top left. This is a soft fruit with a bowl of cottage cheese that goes out. Crisp plating. What our focus here has been, how do we do more with less? My director, Joanne, has been the biggest advocate of room service, and without her, it wouldn't have been here. But when we do room service, as limited as it is, or even when it is not room service, this is how a plate goes out. You can add other fruit to it. You can replace the canned peaches by a selection of some melon and pineapple, and you want to add cheese, remove the cottage cheese and add 2 slices of Swiss cheese, and that's your plate right there. Moving to the center picture, this is manicotti with some cheese melted on. The cheese is not as shiny and bright as a pizzeria or an Italian restaurant because we're using 2% cheese, which kind of dries out after a couple of minutes of baking it. But if you notice the ramekin, the casserole dish that we've used, to the top of the casserole dish, and I'm getting detailed over here, you'll see a little brown speck. That is from the melting of the cheese. The message to the guest is we have actually taken the cheese, gratinated it. There's a little bit of Parmesan over here, which is browned up. Freckles of parsley, chopped parsley, and then the cheese itself. The edge of the plate are clean. The edge of the ramekin is clean. How often have you gone to an Italian restaurant and ordered a casserole dish like this and seen there's a fingerprint on the side that went to the oven and it's dried up sauce? And again, the guests wanted some green vegetables, so we put it on top. Bottom left, you have chicken stew with biscuits. There are 2 ways to do this. Plop the whole thing on a plate, let it run all over, or put it in a casserole dish. Just like going back to what Dan had done, he had his stir-fry vegetables in tiny little casserole. Our casserole is a little bigger. It's stretching out of the plate, but you can look to your vendor for these kind of ideas. Talking of vendor, reach out to your vendors. The vendors, the sales guys, they travel so much. They've seen so many operations. They can tell you how to fix your problem. Honestly, I would say 60% of the times I'm talking to my vendors about what I can come up with ideas, and I tell them straight up, this is my budget, this is what I can spend, or what is the cheapest that you have. Ask for a sample. Ever ask for a sample? They'll give you a sample openly. One moment.
Okay.
Okay.
You having a challenge getting to the next slide?
Yes, ma'am.
Let's see if I can do it. There we are.
Okay. So additionally to the basics of plating that I've talked about, I wanted to show 2 or 3 different styles of plating. So first one, very commonplace nowadays, is a layered plating. This started about a decade, 15 years ago. So in both the cases, the sauce is on the base. In one case, on the left-hand side, they've used a squeeze bottle and drizzled the sauce left to right. You put a scoop of rice, or you can use a cookie cutter and flatten the rice out. You put the protein on top, and then they've got some seaweed on that one. On the right-hand side, you have a piece of, I think it's steak with some greens underneath. Again, these are layered. You build one layer on the next. The whole reason why I brought that up is when you're plating stuff like this, you want to look at the height of your lid, of your plate cover, and see that the cover does not touch the food. One of the pet peeves that I have is when you, as a guest in room service in a hotel, and you open the dome and there's sauce or a garnish sticking to the dome of your plate, it's like, seriously, I don't want anything else to touch my food. How come this touched my food? So that's a thought over there. This over here, what you see right now is a deconstructed plate, different components in different sections of the plate. There's a sauce also, there's a lemon squeeze over there, and there's a sprig of parsley. There's a bunch of different garnishes. The next one is centered plating. This also we can use in our operation. We have a few little pieces of shrimp here in the center. You can take your protein or you can take your vegetables and put it right in the center. Going back to our plate on the side dishes, we had the broccoli and the mac and cheese, both almost in the center. So how would you do that? Think of those different things. Center style plating is pretty easy for, you know, a basic food service aide who has no real skill in plating if they're involved in that process. Moving on to some culinary tools that we've used in our kitchen and we continually use in most kitchens, you'll see them. The biggest factor behind many of these tools is portion control. Portion control, aka dollars, aka work, aka quality. You can just translate and go around in a cycle, in a circle. All these pieces help with that. Flat spatula, 9-inch tong, scoops, that scoop over there. You can scoop anything, anywhere. Sauce spoon. So I use serving spoon, sauce spoon. The picture over here is actually that of a Kunz spoon, spelled as K-U-N-Z. It's about 25 bucks on Amazon. A lot of restaurant chefs use that. It helps make different plate designs. If you Google it, you'll find out. We didn't get into that technique yet. That's more of a culinary detailed piece of it. But again, saucing. The quantity of sauce. Sauce is important because sauce uses a lot of expensive soup base. If you use a good soup base, that adds to your dollars. So this is key over here. Squeeze bottle. Again, if you have cold sauces that can hold on for a while, dressing, squeeze bottles help, and they keep the plate clean. I've also thrown in on a picture on the right, chopped parsley, garnish. We have that in our kitchen all the time. Clean, moist wipe. Whenever we do our meal service, whenever we start our meal service, our tray line has to start with this clean wipe on the side. Take a paper towel, take a cloth towel, clean cloth towel, just fold it up, moisten it, and ready to go. And then we have ladles. Ladles for soup, not for sauces. I'm very big on that. You can't use a ladle for sauce because you're adding 2 ounces of sauce, which is going to make a mess on the plate. To the next slide. Oops. So getting into tray presentation. I wanted to show, sorry. Let's get into tray presentation. Look at the tray on the left, the bottom left versus the top right. The first thing that your eye hits is the plate. We've seen this plate before. We've seen the plate on the right before. But let's look at the tray in itself. You know, Dan talked about his transition, his journey from 2010 to 2015, and how they took actually a great plate, a great tray, and made it excellent, elevated the whole experience. Over here, I'm talking about the basics of tray presentation. On the left-hand side, the tray has been messed around with. You have a ticket that is just thrown there. We have a shabbily plastic-wrapped bowl with peaches in it. On the right, you have a side salad. The plastic wrap is not clean and crisp. But let's look at the whole tray transitioned to the right. The center of the plate, center of the tray, which is the plate. The roll-up of silverware on the left-hand side with the ticket aligned properly. And then your condiments on top. Beverage on one side. Again, like Dan mentioned, where is the handle of the cup? It's very important if you look at these finer details. The peaches have been put in a smaller cup over here with a lid, and then the plastic wrapped side salad has been tightly wrapped, and it is actually dated in the bottom. But just want to give you how crisp these plates, these trays need to look when the patient receives them. Marcia.
Oh, that's you, right?
Sorry, guys.
Let me see. Let me just see. Okay. Yep.
Well,
that's you. And
the last part that we wanted to talk, I want to challenge you all, if it's possible, to elevate the whole dining, the whole meal experience is, once the tray is placed on the bedside, would you be able to coach and encourage your staff to remove the cloche, the dome, with a little drama. Like, if you go to a fancy restaurant, in 5-star restaurants where you have 5 waiters bring the trays down, put them in front of you, and all of them remove the domes, the cloches together, almost like that. Think of that. Can we do that for this patient? And remove the dome and say, voila, here you are. And hopefully that plate will be great.
Thank you, Atul. Thank you. And when I look at these trays, the voila, each of those are patient trays. The one on the right is assisted living. The one on the left is Rex Medical Center. So these are, again, a layering, patient meals, really, really eye-appealing. Let me just do this. Want you to take a look at this. Beef stew. The one on the left, placed in a bowl, nice, rather than plain plate, and then you can put a liner. The one on the right is an actual hospital that is pureed. It's a pureed beef stew. So both are very eye-appealing, colorful. Patients that is in a puree or dementia state can get food just as flavorful, even though you use the soup, but look how they place it. Both are beef stews, so whether it's someone who fully can chew and masticate their food correctly or not, look at that. Beautiful. Put on a plate, tasty, proper, say temperature, right size portion, right vessel, color, and eye appeal. This is what you look for so that people can say, wow, this is good food. The other thing is some final thoughts. Dan and Atul said about collaboration, plate training, portion training, the why. Those are important basic techniques to teach your people to make sure. Don't presume that anyone knows how to do it. Again, techniques, implementation, going through test trays, not only for test trays for temperature, but for eye appeal. The right tray, the right dome, the right vessel, the right cart, everything to keep complementing it. Consider your color, consider your size, and consider your shape. Play it up with garnishes. Where you are in the country will play a role as far as what kind of toppings you can get all year round, and the vessel. Tray accessories. Make sure your tray accessories complement, which means the napkin. It doesn't have to be a white napkin. It could be a colored napkin. Speak to your business partners, even though you may want utensils already rolled. Speak to your business partners. See what applications are out there or what's available. Look at different fiesta plates. Look at the plates on the bottom. It's those same round plates that go under your domes that are out there, but you can use color. I just spoke to a food service director in Minneapolis, and she was saying, I use color. We use color with food to complement it. Imagination. Make healthcare food delicious, beautiful, flavorful. Think of these ideas to take your, again, visual. You go back to this tray. No matter if I was a patient, whether I could chew my food right or not, this would be eye-appealing to me. And again, a scoop. It's not really, it's just how it's placed and visual. So we hope we've given you some great ideas to think about. Got a few minutes for a few more questions. Okay, okay. As far as for housekeeping tips, somebody asked me that. The certificate of participation, the recording, and the PowerPoint slideshow is available on the allyouserve.com website early next week. And so the other component is, I was asked, somebody asked, they're a long-term care rural hospital, and what kind of, so Dan, and you're welcome, you get some great ideas, but I'm going to propose this question. Dan and Atul, they're a rural hospital. Do you have any other ideas in which they can enhance the patient tray?
Besides all the things that we talked about today?
Yeah. Anything else that comes to your mind or reiterating?
I think part of it is just getting lots of ideas. I mean, I think that was our overall collective goal today, is saying, can you take pictures of yours? Can you compare them to some of the ones that were in the decks? And where can you see some of them. I think that it's always balanced by what the cost is. You know, while we're very proud of being able to do carafes and China mugs, to do that in one of my inpatient settings would be very cost prohibitive to do that. The only other one that comes to mind is looking at towelettes and some other things there about, you know, can you clean your hands, and can you do that as part of the patient dining experience? I don't think there's any infection control benefit there. It's literally about what does that patient experience have, and I think the biggest thing that we've tried to do always is, if I'm sitting in that bed, what would I want, and what would I hope that people would be, you know, looking at and providing to me.
Thank you.
I mean, from a rural area, it all depends on what your constraints are and what your strengths are. So like Dan mentioned, you know, what is affordable for you? How big is your operation? My suggestion would be, do you still use melamine or styrofoam and that kind of thing? Can you transition to China and actual silverware? That is the first step. It's actually not a huge investment if you look at it. So let's say if you're a 100-bed hospital and you're getting 200 sets of plates and silverware. Do you have the funds to budget that out? Talk to your vendor for that. That's a key part. And once that silverware in China comes in, let's use that properly. Don't just throw it on the plate, because all of this is actually work to be done. So is your plate clean? Do we have the time, and will we train our food service aides, our cooks, to plate properly and make sure the food is in the right spot? So again, coming back to the same things that we talked about, and this person is asking, what can we do more? I would say let's get the basics down right first, and then look at what more. And if there's any specific thing that you want to discuss, shoot out an email to Marsha Diamond, and we can try to help you out.
And the other component is, I would add to you is that look at the components of, like somebody mentioned about the puree, how nice it looks. Again, putting it in a bowl and having the same colors that you would do for a regular beef stew, you can, you know, look at the texture of it and make a difference. Layering it, you know, rather than just separate everything like the potatoes here, vegetable there, putting it together and laying it, giving that little bit of edge. You know, take a look at your trays. The other thing is, how often do you actually really take a look at different trays? We always do temperatures. We always take a look at quality, the taste, but really the tray, the experience. The final thing I'll say is, if you have a great photo of your patient tray, submit it to me, and we're going to pick out 10 winners and send out a Visa gift card. So please join us in doing that and be able to get some of your trays out there. We, as All You Serve, want to elevate your meal experience. We want to help you. Again, use these PowerPoints. Let us know how else we can help you. My contact information is on the slide. If you need anyone else's contact, please contact me. And have a wonderful weekend. And thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great weekend, everybody.